The radical left has taken over the Democratic Party.
Hello and welcome to Think Progressively, covering politics and all the other chaos life has to offer. This is episode 96, recorded on Friday, July 21st from Milwaukee. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jason.
What are we going to do for the 100th episode?
Probably nothing.
Cool. Well, at least on today's episode, we're going to examine the misinformation of Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Sorry, I had the wrong one. But first, the headlines.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
First up in headlines, let's give an update to our previous story on Biden-Burisma bribery bombshell.
Oh, see, this is what I was talking about.
So the Biden crime family whistleblower,
We have his name now.
Gal Luft,
All right.
recently had his federal indictment unsealed last week, Monday.
Great.
What a reliable witness, as James Comer put it.
So what was the indictment for?
The indictment charges Luft with 8 counts, including failing to register as a foreign agent, evading oil sanctions, 2 counts of making false statements to investigators, and 3 counts of illicit arms trafficking. He's basically a Chinese spy that also smuggles illegal weapons.
No, Biden's the Chinese spy. Get your narrative right.
I think officially, Gal Luft is the at least alleged Chinese spy.
And Republicans are still trying to prop this guy up as some kind of like notable, respectable source.
Right. And there's a lot of confusion over what exactly happened when this news broke. I saw a lot of people, even reputable news sources that I trust, saying either he was just charged with this or he had just been captured because he was on the run, which neither of those two are true. It's just that this indictment was unsealed, so the information was made public.
Sure.
He was initially arrested in Cyprus on February 17th, but fled after being released on bail while extradition proceedings were pending.
Okay.
He has been on the run and remains on the run since February 17th.
What the hell?
So we do not know where he is.
Well, I'm sure he's going to make his way to Congress to testify really soon.
Right, which we'll talk about here in a second. Luft, a little bit of background, he is a dual U.S.-Israeli citizen and the co-director of the Maryland-based Institute for the Analysis of Global Security.
Okay, great. What a name.
And I looked into it. That is a really, really shady non-profit organization.
I said, we are the bad guys of the movie name.
Just looking at their executive compensation since 2019 has actually been higher than all of their reported income.
Oh, no.
So they're getting some other revenue from somewhere. Maybe illegal arms sales?
Oh, dear.
And in a statement, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Damian Williams, alleged that Luft had, quote, subverted foreign agent registration laws in the United States to seek to promote Chinese policies by acting through a former high-ranking U.S. government official.
You know, what every Republican dreams of from a whistleblower. True American values, that's what I say.
While serving as the co-director of the think tank that we mentioned, Luft agreed to covertly recruit and pay the official, an advisor to then-President-elect Donald Trump,
Oh, fantastic.
to publicly support certain policies with respect to China.
Great.
Who might this former high-ranking U.S. government official who was an advisor to President-elect Donald Trump possibly be?
Well, couldn't it have just been the guy where this whole story came from in the first place?
That's my vote, and that would be former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani. But as you said, maybe he'll end up in front of Congress? And that might be because our own dum-dum Senator, Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, said last week Sunday that authorities had arrested Luft in Cyprus to, quote, silence him, and that he is an important witness who needs to be granted immunity to be able to testify and tell his story.
Oh, for God's sakes.
Literally campaigning to give a Chinese spy and illegal arms dealer immunity so he can tell the fake story about Joe and Hunter Biden that Rudy Giuliani fed to him. And actually that Russian agents fed to Rudy Giuliani, who then passed it off to Gal Luft.
It's just a Russian nesting doll. It's stupid.
And clearly he was doing all of this to try to get some sort of immunity
Right.
in the first place, because he knew that eventually he was going to get caught for all of the illegal things that he was doing. And of course, conservatives and Republicans are pushing this story as some sort of gotcha to Joe Biden.
As in they're still trying to push this story as a gotcha.
In particular, this Gal Luft part, like, well, see, he's on the run because the Biden administration is out to get him. Yeah, no, this has been an ongoing investigation for a long time, and he was charged in February and has been on the run since then.
Right. Hey, Joe's been active, man, ever since he took office.
They just didn't notice until now, I guess,
Right.
when the indictment became public. Let's move on with another update in the continuing Supreme Court corruption saga that just keeps getting worse and worse and worse the more people investigate the finances and activities of our Supreme Court justices. It was recently reported by The Guardian that lawyers with Supreme Court business paid Clarence Thomas's aide via Venmo.
What? What?
Former Clarence Thomas aide Rajan Vashit, I'm going to go with Vashit, not sure, who was an aide from 2019 to 2021, so very recently,
Yeah.
was paid via Venmo by multiple lawyers, supposedly for Clarence Thomas's 2019 Christmas party.
What is happening?
His Venmo account, which was public before this story was published and has since been made private for some reason, show that he received 7 payments in November and December of 2019 from lawyers who had previously served as Thomas's legal clerks. The amount of the payments was not known, but they were listed as either Christmas Party, Thomas Christmas Party, CT Clarence Thomas Christmas Party, or CT Xmas Party. Oh, they're taking Christ out of Christmas, Joe.
So, wait, can we pause for a hot second and just talk about... So, I have Venmo. I've used it. It's great. Revolutionized how we handle money. Fantastic. Whatever. Can we talk...
And how we bribe Supreme Court justices,
Right, that
apparently.
too. But can we talk about how weird it is for anybody, not just like these guys, but for anybody to like just post publicly about their transactions with other people? I just find it so freaking weird.
Yeah, I don't. I'm a little bit older than you are. I don't really use Venmo.
Oh, it's great.
Not really in that situation a lot.
Oh, it's so
I don't
much
really
easier.
go out and do anything. We've talked about this before. I am basically a shut-in. I am a hermit. I'm not going out and splitting the bill with a bunch of people for whatever. So that usually doesn't, it's not really a concern for me. But yes,
Still.
it is, and it is extra strange to me just to be like your payment history could somehow be public, or that you would want it to be public.
Right. I don't get it. I don't understand it at all. And then like they have like a feed of like all your friends. You can be friends be like, so-and-so paid so-and-so. Like, why would I want to know this? Sorry. All right. Going back to it.
So the lawyers who made those transactions were Patrick Strawbridge, a partner at one of the firms who recently won their Supreme Court case abolishing affirmative action, Kate Todd, who served as White House deputy counsel under Donald Trump and is now a managing partner of Ellis George Cipollone Law Office, as you might recognize Cipollone, who of course is Pat Cipollone, who was one of Donald Trump's legal counsels while he was president. Elbert Lynn, a former Solicitor General of West Virginia, who played a key role in a Supreme Court case that limited the EPA's ability to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. We had that story
I think we literally talked about
last
that.
year
Yeah.
after that terrible ruling. And Brian Schmaltzbach, a
Oh my.
partner at McGuire Woods, who has argued multiple cases before the Supreme Court.
Fantastic.
There are other lawyers named in this article. We're not going to go through them all because we'll be here forever. But just in that list, there are some huge conflicts of interest. They should not be giving money for anything related to a Supreme Court justice.
How much faith have you lost? Like
All of it. I have no faith. The Supreme Court is just openly taking bribes. It's very clear. They are just openly taking bribes. And I guess that's just fine. They refuse to submit to any sort of ethics regulations.
Thank you, John Roberts.
And they are a corrupt and bought and paid for portion of our government now. That doesn't make it, I guess, any different than the other branches of government.
What I was going to say, though, is that it's actually easier now because there's less of them that matters, right? Where at least with the House of Representatives, you have to at least bribe a bunch of them to do something. And usually with with our Congress, it doesn't even matter because we can't get anything passed anyway. If you have 5 people in your pocket, you run the damn country.
The conservative complaint with all of this reporting coming out is, oh, look at all these media organizations trying to undermine the credibility of the Supreme Court. And we've said it before, and I'm going to say it again now. The Supreme Court undermined their own credibility when they started taking bribes.
Absolutely. Now let's move on to a better story. Third time's the charm, where now Trump has received a target alert for special counsel Jack Smith for his possibly third indictment.
His third indictment from activities that just taking place while he was president.
Right.
It's not even close to the third time that Donald Trump has been indicted.
Right. So Trump announced that he received a target alert from special counsel Jack Smith last Sunday. And I don't know if you saw any of his press conferences or
crazy truth social
no one.
posts.
Well, no, that too. But it's like, I don't know what happens here. No one ever gets anything sent to them on Sunday. They must really have it out for me.
Because he's the most special boy in the entire world.
I am the most special boy. And so basically it informed him, if you guys don't know what target letter is, and I'm not going to pretend that I did, it informed Trump that he's allowed to speak in front of the grand jury that may ultimately indict him.
Right, it let him know that he is the target of a grand jury investigation.
Hence, target letter. However, he will most likely not do so. 1, because he's Donald Trump. But 2,
I think it would have been in the news had he gone.
Right.
And that would have been, I think, Thursday, right?
Correct. And no one who ever receives target letters do anyway. I saw another analysis from a couple of lawyers saying if I would ever have let my client go do that, I basically should be disbarred for...
Right. You never talk to the cops.
For malpractice. Right, exactly. But it also means that he will most likely be indicted related to obstruction and other potential crimes relating to his attempt to overturn the 2020 election and his involvement with the January 6th insurrection.
And that indictment has not yet come through. Everyone in the world has been checking repeatedly throughout this week.
I literally did it right before we came onto this podcast.
So we don't know what the details are. We don't know what the charges are.
No.
Apparently, there's known to be 3 possible charges. I think that was in the letter, but it didn't say what
they were.
And we don't have those details. It's not like Trump is transparent enough to actually post the letter.
Right.
You just get his description of it.
And we also don't know if anyone else, such as John Eastman or Rudy Giuliani, will be charged alongside for their actions as well.
And this could be relating to the activities on January 6th. It could be activities leading up to January 6th. It could be post-January 6th. We know it has something to do with the election. It might possibly have something to do with the fake elector scheme.
Correct.
And in a related story, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel has filed felony charges against the 16 people involved in the fake elector scheme in 2020 in Michigan.
Good.
Each defendant faces 8 felony counts, ranging from conspiracy and election law forgery to forgery and uttering and publishing false statements. Most of the charges are punishable by up to 14 years in prison, while others are 5-year felonies. Stan Grott, the Republican clerk of Shelby Township, has been barred from administering any elections while the charges are pending, which is good news for the residents of Shelby Township. Always good when your county clerk is involved in a scheme to...
I mean, with a name like Stan Grott, did you really expect anything differently?
Stan Grott! Michigan becomes the second state to file such charges, following Arizona AG Chris Mays, who also filed charges against the fake electors in that state. Georgia has granted immunity to 8 of its 16 fake electors for cooperation in their investigation. And I have here, why is Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Kaul such a coward? As no charges have been announced, no investigation seems to be underway. In Wisconsin, we definitely had fake electors. We know who they all are.
Yep.
And we
know where they met.
Yes, in the state capitol, thanks to my, unfortunately, U.S. Representative Scott Fitzgerald, who is the one who booked the room for the fake electors, and he needs to be charged along with those fake electors. There is a civil suit that is pending, brought up by Democratic voters, because obviously the fake elector scheme was designed to overturn the will of the voters and throw out the results of the election that went in favor of Joe Biden.
Well, and when you think about it as well, if you don't do so, you just enable them to do it again.
Correct. And there are also Pennsylvania, New Mexico, and Nevada that could also apparently use a new attorney general because they had false elector schemes that have also not had any charges announced, no investigations that we know of are underway.
Come on, grow some cojones. Let's go.
I did take the time today to write a pointedly worded letter to Josh Kaul's office.
Did you now?
Asking him to, in fact, announce an investigation or announce charges being filed against those that were involved. And I know we do have a few listeners here in the state of Wisconsin. I urge you to do the same if that is important to you. If your vote mattering is something that you would like to continue.
That you actually care about or whatever. And since we're in Wisconsin territory, let's talk about Wisconsin and some local school craziness, because why the hell not? As some listeners may know, in Waukesha, which is a Republican conservative stronghold in our state, a teacher was initially criticized, a music teacher to be more precise, for wanting to play Rainbow Land by Miley Cyrus and Dolly Parton at their first grade music recital, which was banned. Well, now we found out that officially that music teacher has been fired from the school district. So I don't know if we talked about this at all.
I don't believe so.
Okay, cool. Then I'm just going to go through the story anyway. First grade music teacher Melissa Temple wanted to include Miley Cyrus and Dolly Parton's song Rainbow Land for their spring concert. You can check the lyrics of the song. It's actually fine. It's actually quite cute and it's very Dolly Parton.
I mean, it'll turn your kids trans, but okay.
Don't tell them that. We're trying to keep that a secret. You are a bad cabal member, all right?
Too open.
Temple checked with her principal, who rejected the song, saying that it went against the school district's controversial issues policy. Now, I put down their controversial issues policy because I just wanted to read this to you guys because it's incredible. From their policy itself, it says, the school board believes that the consideration of controversial issues has a legitimate place in the instructional program of the schools. Properly introduced and conducted, the consideration of such issues can help students learn to identify important issues, explore fully and fairly all sides of an issue, weigh carefully the values and factors involved, and develop techniques for formulating and evaluating positions.
So the students are supposed to do this, not the parents.
Correct. For purposes of this policy, a controversial issue is a topic on which opposing points of view have been promulgated by responsible opinion and likely to arouse both support and opposition in the community. Sure. The board will permit the introduction and proper educational use of controversial issues provided their use in the instructional program, number 1, is related to the instructional goals of the course of study and level of maturity of the students. Number 2, does not tend to indoctrinate or persuade students to a particular point of view,
like the song does.
And number 3, encourages open-mindedness and is conducted in a spirit of scholarly inquiry. We don't want anyone indoctrinating our students here in the Waukesha public school system. Temple then tweeted out saying, my first graders were so excited to sing Rainbow Land for our spring concert, but has been vetoed by our administration. When will it end? Sheldon also tagged Miley Cyrus, Dolly Parton, the Gay Student Alliance of Wisconsin, and some others as well. And then she also included a picture of the lyrics of the song. Because of that specifically, and that's where I want to
exercising her First Amendment
rights.
I
want to make it very clear. It's not because she tried to introduce Rainbow Land, it's because she tried to tweet on her own time. She was then immediately put on leave at the recommendation of the superintendent. The school board just had a hearing where they voted 9-0. Good job, Waukesha. camera to fire Miss Temple. An attorney for the school district stated, quote, "Rather than speak with Mark Schneider, who is the principal, directly, Miss Temple took a widespread media campaign challenging the district's motives.
She a multi-million-dollar media blitz.
Misrepresenting the facts of her lying motivations to further her own interests rather than those of her students."
Not furthering the interest of your first grade students.
Where I'm sure the attorney representing Miss Temple then just went, "It was a fucking tweet."
Very calm and measured response by the attorney for the school district of Waukesha.
He continued, though, saying that Miss Temple's actions caused, quote, "substantial disruptions and safety concerns."
What do you think the safety concerns were?
Too many gays.
You don't think it's because if they had sung that song,
They'd all become gay.
that some rabid homophobic and transphobic parents would protest outside of the school? And is that this teacher's fault?
For some
That
reason,
there are people that are such freaks out there when it comes to the issue of a song called Rainbow Land, that it's become such a extreme issue that people think literally that this is promoting child sex trafficking,
well, and literal satanic worship somehow.
that maybe that's the cause, and not that a first grade teacher put out a tweet saying that she wasn't allowed to have her students sing this song.
For some reason, I just have the scene from The Field of Dreams where it's just, but instead of like, if you build it, they will come. I said, if you sing it, they will come. I'm just imagining a horde of just angry parents coming out of the cornfields, just surrounding the school.
The Moms for Liberty.
The principal also testified at the school board hearing, saying he did not ban or veto Rainbow Land, but just told the teacher to make a different choice.
Which would be the definition of banning or vetoing. No, you can't sing that song. Pick something else. I'm not banning or vetoing it. I'm just saying you can't do it.
This is so dumb. He also said that he wasn't against the song per se, but that he was worried that by Miley Cyrus previously promoted content that was inappropriate for children. Quote, "If the students are Googling or researching one of the artists, some inappropriate images or videos could appear. I just felt there would be better options for a first grade concert."
So because the potential for a child to say, oh, who is this song sung by? Miley Cyrus?
Let me Google Miley Cyrus.
And what is the worst that they're going to see? Like the Wrecking Ball music video?
But even then, I was talking with
And this is all the responsibility of this first. Do they take this same stance on literally everything that's in any of the textbooks that these kids have?
I was just going to say that.
That you could potentially Google? Are they going to have to ban anything that could possibly come up in a result that might have some mildly inappropriate content? That's ridiculous.
And when I was talking with my fiance about this, I actually thought back to like when I was a kid. I don't know if you were probably way too old for this. I used to love watching the Kids' Choice Awards on Nickelodeon. And literally it's just a kids' fun little award show. It's nothing.
People get slimed.
It's not anything serious at all. And they have tons of celebrities that they give awards to. And guess what? These same actors and actresses and singers go to this thing, are celebrated by children because they have family-friendly content.
Miley Cyrus started off as like
on the Disney Channel.
Disney, like the Hannah Montana.
But then those people can also then get off of Nickelodeon and then go do adult content.
Shock and
Well, I was actually just going to say, like, what, are we going to start banning Harry Potter because Daniel Radcliffe did some more adult movies later after Harry Potter? Then I realized, oh, we're in Waukesha. They probably banned Harry Potter already.
Right, because it turns your kids into witches.
Ugh. Outside the school, there were multiple protests and counter protests. Now, I'm going to give you two quotes from the article.
Only she hadn't sent that tweet.
I'm going to give you two quotes from the article. One from someone who was in the pro-temple protest and someone who was in the counter protest who's on the school side. I just want you to see if you can spot the difference in issues here. So from the support side, we have someone saying, "We feel like Superintendent Serbert's recommendation for her to be fired, for her to be terminated, goes against her First Amendment rights as an employee of a public school district. We're wearing black, reminding folks that there is an attempt to silence teachers, and we've seen it in other avenues. Whether it's what they can wear in the classroom, pins that they can put on their lanyards, things like that. We've seen those First Amendment rights under assault before, but this is where the rubber meets the road. Gonna be honest, Jason, that sounds like a pretty sensible thing to say. Even though we are biased, it seems pretty sensible.
Right. It certainly is not an aggressive or unsubstantiated claim.
So then the reporters walked across the street to the counter protest, and here's where they found someone that said this, quote, "The fact that they're willing to take a stand and be like, okay, if one of our teachers is not going to be in line with the way that we are running our school district, and she's going to be promoting the LGBTQ agenda in her classroom and things like that, them taking a stand against that is encouraging because most school districts won't take a stand against that. I want to show that if there's a school board willing to take a stand on these issues, then I'm here to support them as well because there's not very many of them left."
A lot of thems.
A lot of thems.
Thems and that's.
And again, we go back to the bullshit conspiracy of teachers promoting some weird, bizarre LGBTQ agenda, and they're trying to gayify our kids. It's so freaking ridiculous, man. And we could sit here and laugh at it all day long, but we see that this has real consequences. A teacher was fired.
She just lost her job.
Yeah, a teacher was literally fired for this.
And a classroom full of 6-year-olds that wanted to sing a song couldn't sing the song they wanted to sing.
Right. And look, I do sometimes get that employees get fired for causing harm to the organizations they work for. So if, like, for example, I remember like a time back when a Marquette professor got fired because he was like literally outing and attacking another professor at, like, using BS conspiracy theories in the process, and he was let go and he screamed freedom of speech all day long. And I was against him being rehired because he was an idiot. And just because you have freedom of speech does not mean you are free from
can't
consequences.
use that to harass fellow
Correct.
employees. Like, that's harassment.
But I'm saying I know that there are limits to like how much you can actually say, and you can't scream freedom of speech all day long, no matter what, right? However, I think this is a perfect example of the hypocrisy of these conservative culture warriors. Where were the free speech warriors that constantly scream about censorship in our schools all day long and won't shut the hell up about it? Oh yeah, they're silent because they don't care because they actually hate LGBTQ people.
They were the protesters.
Right? Scream about the LGBTQ agenda. That's just one story from Wisconsin schools that we're going to tell you about. We have another one from Arrowhead School District where they've officially banned safe space signs. Arrowhead is no longer a safe space. The new policy that was adopted in a 6-3 vote says, quote, "Specifying certain areas as safe zones for some, as well as displaying and postings that promote one group over others can create
neither of which are true.
Can create a feeling of isolation, division, and estrangement. This can also create the sense that all areas of our school are not equal, with some areas being safer and more tolerant than others." Board members who argued in favor of this policy said that, and this, like, a lot of it came from stickers. These were stickers, Jason.
Right. Well, it creates the feeling that some areas of our school are safer than others or more tolerant than others. It sounds like they are.
No
and
kidding.
It sounds like the areas that are not as tolerant are where the school board members, principals, and administration are.
Quite literally. And I cannot tell you how these are just literally stickers, where you had some staff that put stickers in front of their classroom that said, and it was like a little rectangular sticker.
Yeah, and again, we'll quote what they said when they adopted this new policy, that it said specifying certain areas as safe zones for some.
Yep.
And promoting one group over others.
Yep.
You tell me what the sticker said.
The sticker said, "This is a safe space for all."
Oh, clearly only for some, and not the exact opposite of some.
But you see, Jason, the stickers were also rainbow colored.
Oh, the rainbow strikes again. That dastardly rainbow. We need to outlaw prisms. Do you know what they do with light?
I'll say, God showed mercy with a rainbow once, and they haven't shut the hell up about ever since. Board members who argued in favor of the policy said the stickers, which were typically rainbow colored, like we said before, were inherently divisive. And one board member recommended putting school pride stickers up instead without the words safe space. And it was like, we are all Arrowhead or something like that.
Defeats the entire point. The point of putting up this is a safe space sticker is to show the children, no matter what else is going on in your life, be it at home, be it in other parts of the school, be it outside, in the classroom, you are safe. And you are safe to tell the teacher anything. That's what it means.
Right.
And it's not inherently just for LGBT students. It does mean that, again, if there is something that the student needs to talk about and does not have a place outside of school that any person they can talk to, this is a safe place for them to go and for them to share.
Correct.
Those bastards. So for the last week and a half, and yeah, a lot of the stories that we're going over actually from last week versus this week, because obviously we missed an episode last week. You were unavailable, Joe.
Sorry.
But one thing that I've been seeing in a lot of places is this very homoerotic ad for Ron DeSantis.
This ad's crazy.
I don't know how it can be so homoerotic yet so like homophobic at the same time.
Now,
But that's kind of like a thing with the Republican Party anyway.
I mean, we did talk about Tucker Carlson's manhood thing.
Tan your butthole.
Yeah. No, your balls.
Well, I think you kind of get them both.
Oh, okay. So I'm not going to say this often. In Ron DeSantis' defense, his campaign didn't create the ad. It was an external group, and Ron DeSantis' campaign...
Yeah, the Proud Elephant, which is like a big
Right.
meme factory right-wing.
Right. They shared it.
Right. The Ron DeSantis' campaign, the Ron DeSantis War Room, which is an official part of his campaign, shared this video, which we'll link it. You can watch it if you haven't already seen it. It's like the most super internet-y video. Like you have to be
Like in the right-wing internet sphere.
Yeah, you have to be like a Gen Zer conservative.
That constantly goes to Turning Points USA conferences. So long story short is that it's supposed to be an attack ad on Donald Trump.
Right. The thing that Ron DeSantis needs to do but is terrified of doing.
But the thing that he's attacking Trump on, God forbid you think it'd be like all the indictments, it's that Donald Trump is too accepting of LGBTQ people. And it has like
and specifically transgender people.
And literally, it has like a bunch of clips of him showing the smallest minuscule amount of empathy.
Well, and it's usually to right-wing trans figures like
Caitlyn Jenner.
Would you let Caitlyn Jenner use whichever restroom she wanted?
And he's like, sure, whatever.
And then the fact that he allowed a trans woman to compete in the Miss Universe or Miss America, whichever.
That he would allow.
Whichever one of those stupid pageants.
Well, and then there was another clip of like him saying that like he would protect LGBTQ people after the Pulse nightclub shooting. Ron DeSantis is against that. So basically he's on the side of the shooter,
right?
I guess. And literally it's just like this one weird thing where it just cuts out and it has like no or not today Trump or something like that, and gives like this like crazy dubstep.
I believe it was Psych.
Oh, Psych, yeah. Crazy dubstep like music that was just going on.
Yes.
Ron DeSantis has like laser eyes and it's like
cutting in clips from American Psycho as somehow positive.
And like all this weird, again, like you said, very homoerotic.
Extremely homoerotic. Even puts Top Gun in there, which I think is funny.
Yeah.
It is very, very conservative Republican, like I said, both homoerotic and homophobic at the same time.
Oh, man.
Definitely the guy that passes the anti-gay bill and then gets busted in a rest stop bathroom for offering sex.
I mean, I can just see that's how it's going to go. He's like the perfect example of you doth protest too much.
And that links in with our final headline, which I wanted to get to today. The Florida Board of Education, under Ron DeSantis, approved new guidelines for its Black History curriculum in public schools. These new changes are the latest since the Stop Woke Act was enacted in July, again written by Ron DeSantis. That law says discussions about race must be taught in an objective manner.
What does that even mean?
And should not be used to indoctrinate or persuade students to a particular point of view.
What does that even mean in this? Oh my God. Okay.
Your history cannot promote a specific point of view, which is pretty much impossible. It also states that students should not feel guilty for actions taken in the past by people of their same race or origin.
Well, that's just
How
weird.
do you do that? How do you stop someone's feelings? It's pretty much impossible. As part of the new guidelines, the Board of Education is requiring middle school students to be instructed on, I I swear this is real.
Jason, I'm gonna flip this table, man.
Slaves developed skills which, in some instances, could be applied for their personal benefit.
Holy fucking shit. Can we go back to the whole...
That's a quote.
Can we go back to the whole not indoctrinating to a personal point of view? Are you kidding me? Jason, I'm going to flip this freaking table, man.
Slavery was good, actually.
Holy absolutely not.
It taught those dumb Africans some skills from the white man, holder of all skills.
Yeah.
Keeper of the knowledge of the world.
Skills like grit and obedience.
And
Jesus.
How to get your foot chopped off for trying to run away.
Oh my God.
How to be someone's property and not human.
Okay.
For high school students, the Board of Education will now require certain events, like the many race massacres against black neighborhoods, such as Tulsa, which we have covered previously. It's a very good episode, I believe. Ocoee and Rosewood. Neither of which, they're both in Florida, and neither of which I've heard of before, and are both now on our list of potential future episodes. So, teaches that those race massacres against black neighborhoods were a, quote, act of violence perpetrated against and by African Americans.
What? No! Oh my God. Oh.
The Stand Your Ground state thinks that during a race massacre where your home is being burned and your family murdered, if you try to defend yourself, that's perpetrating violence.
Oh my God. There was bad people on both sides.
A lot of blame to go around in those race massacres.
Oh my God.
Ron DeSantis, everybody, wants to be president of the entire United States. Thankfully, his polling is absolutely cratering.
Thanks to
and that's even in the Republican primary. Honestly, I hope something happens to Donald Trump. Either he's in jail or he dies tomorrow, and Ron DeSantis is the nominee. Ron DeSantis is the worst general election candidate you can think of. You imagine, this is all you have to do, is just put these quotes from this law that Ron DeSantis created. Just put that up there. Slaves develop skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit.
Jesus Christ.
Instead of slaves actually revolutionized agriculture in the South because they brought all of their knowledge from Africa. No, they were taught. All of the skills that they had, they were taught by white men who owned them because black people inherently had no skills. That is what this is teaching, which is both wrong and incredibly racist. Yay, Republican Party.
Jason, I didn't know about this. Now I'm angry.
You're welcome.
M&Ms will not be satisfied until every last cartoon character is deeply unappealing and totally androgynous. Until the moment you wouldn't want to have a drink with any one of them. That's the goal. When you're totally turned off, they've won.
Boy ain't right.
And now for our Foxed in the Head segment.
You found this one. Sorry, I'm still really messed up about...
You're kind of reeling from
my God.
The Black History guidelines.
I didn't know this. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. We're in a new segment now. We have played the music.
Right, it's done. That's like a cutoff.
I am in a new phase of my life. I'm going to internalize it and move on. You have a thing. I don't know anything about this, but all I see is Michael Knowles. Condoms are kind of gay.
That is a direct quote.
What is this?
So once again, this comes from MediaMatters.org. They watch Fox News and Newsmax and OAN, and they collect all of this crazy nonsense that comes out of right-wing pundits and present it for people like us so that we can use it as content. And I do think, well, again, we'll link it. Watch the whole video. It's like 7 minutes long, so I don't want to play it all. I'm not going to quote it all. Michael Knowles doesn't have a particularly strange voice, so I can't even do a voice for him. But this is from the July 10th edition of the Daily Wire's Michael Knowles show, in which he says, "The culture that treats sex very casually pregnancy, and that suggests we have a right to sex absent the consequence of pregnancy, is going to be a culture that's more likely to engage in abortion. So, according to Michael Knowles, we do not have a right to sex absent the consequence of pregnancy.
Yes.
And he goes on. Furthermore, we're all complaining about the Pride movement. And the Pride movement has become...
No, Michael, we're not all complaining about the Pride movement. Let's
everyone
start
he
with
knows.
His 3 friends that he knows.
Which are Ben Shapiro... And who's the other freak?
That one Hershey's guy that he...
Right, the Hershey's guy, but who's the other freak that's on the Daily Wire all the time with the beard?
Oh, and Matt Walsh.
Matt Walsh, that's the other one. You can't tell them apart. Everybody's growing a beard.
Because that's manly.
It's manly.
Manly!
And the Pride movement has become much less popular than it used to be. You're seeing this is in a drop. Gallup polling and the values survey that it gives out showed a significant drop in support for the Pride Coalition in just 1 year. And he's basically talking about how himself and, like we mentioned, Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, Marjorie Taylor Greene, all of the extremists that have taken over the Republican Party have led to a much lower support for even the gay community. We're not even talking about trans,
straight up
just the gay community, gay marriage, gay rights, things that were basically progressing as a society in the 90s. That among conservatives, that is now reversing.
Yes.
And he's saying that as like it's just naturally occurring, that he is not part of the movement that's pushing it.
No kidding. Which always drives me nuts too with these types of people, because you'll see this weird disassociation of themselves from the harm that they create all the freaking time. When you look at people like Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, and even like Stephen Crowder and Tim Pool, they'll talk about like they're just like neutral observers. I'm like, no, you guys are the ones that are literally pushing this crap all day freaking long. You're the problem. Period. Full stop. There is no but at the end of the sentence.
And they're saying, look, it's not just transing the kids, which...
Transing the kids?
It's transgenderism more broadly.
What?
This was the point of my CPAC speech, in which he called for everyone to rise up and kill transgender people. And it's not just transgenderism, it's the redefinition of marriage.
Oh, there it is.
And it's not just the redefinition of marriage, it's the way we view sex.
There it is.
Why did Gallup show a 7-point drop in support for same-sex relations of any kind? Again, it's because of you and people like you.
And starting our literal moral panic.
But according to Michael Knowles, because people are beginning to pull on the thread of transing the kids and realizing that because ideas have consequences, bad consequences come from bad ideas, which is a nonsense sentence. And so they're going all the way back. They are, like it's some fictional they and not him. And forget redefining marriage or whatever. You go all the way back to the beginning of the sexual revolution.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And you go all the way back to contraception.
Oh, no.
There were 2 cases, Eisenstadt and Griswold. First was Griswold in 1965. Then Eisenstadt comes around in 1972, the year before Roe v. Wade. And Griswold finds a right to condoms within a marriage. Where is that in the Constitution?
What are you
I have no idea.
Oh my God.
Hold on, just let me finish. Then we'll talk about it. But some libs on the court discovered that magically in 1965.
Some libs on... Oh my... I'm going to kill this guy.
But they... in Minecraft.
In Minecraft.
But they said, but there is no right to condoms outside of marriage. Then 7 years later, the court discovers, oh, actually, there was more invisible ink in the Constitution. And actually, there is a right to condoms outside of marriage. Okay, maybe you like condoms. Maybe you don't like condoms. I don't know where you're going to find that in the Constitution.
Oh my God.
I think a lot of people are beginning to notice that the contraceptive mentality is the beginning of the pride mentality.
What?
Because the contraceptive mentality divorces sex from the consequences of sex, it introduces a sterile sexual ethic, which is exactly what gave us the pride movement. There's no distinction here. If you can't read between the lines, the conclusion that one draws is that condoms are kind of gay, to put it as bluntly as possible.
What? Jason.
And just to be
There's
clear,
so many layers, Jason. There's so many layers.
just to be clear, Griswold said that essentially you have a right to privacy
Yes.
in your own bedroom.
Yes.
And that the Constitution guarantees you that right to privacy.
Well, and the worst understanding of the Constitution I probably ever heard in my entire life. Where would we find that in the Constitution? I'm sorry, there's not a literal right to condom use.
Right. You know what else there isn't in the Constitution, Michael Knowles? There's not a right to own a car. There's not a right to own a computer. There's not a right to own a cell phone. There's not a right to fly in a plane. Does that mean that we should all get together and ban those things because we think they're icky? Or we think they somehow lead to gayness?
Well, and then on top of that as well, I'm sorry, Michael, did you not think that people were having sex before condoms were used? And let's be real here, condoms were used before, oh God. I mean,
There were just sheepskin condoms and things like that. Even
like
before
in
latex
ancient,
and-
like literal ancient times.
Right. Using animal bladders and all
which was-
sorts of fun
I mean,
stuff.
they weren't good, but they were used. Holy crap.
Beyond all of the insanity that is there. And again, if we're going to talk about what is actually in the Constitution, the one thing the Constitution does actually specifically spell out is that your right to bear arms should come in the context of a well-trained, well-regulated militia. It says those words, and we've decided that that doesn't mean anything, and it just means go to Walmart and buy an assault rifle.
Yep.
So who's really paying attention to the actual text of the Constitution at this point anyway? But beyond all of that insanity, I think it's important because he is literally laying out the plan. This is exactly the same thing that Clarence Thomas said. This is exactly the same thing that Ted Cruz said. Michael Knowles is incredibly extreme. He is insane. But what he is not is fringe when it comes to the current GOP. He is as mainstream as it gets. The leadership, the entire ideal of the Republican Party currently is for a very strict evangelical Christian interpretation of our rights, which does not include the right to contraception. And remember, last year the House voted to pass a bill to enshrine the right to contraception into law, which was scoffed at by Republicans because no one is talking about removing those rights. Even though, again, Clarence Thomas specifically said that he was going to try to remove those rights. And Ted Cruz specifically said that he is going to try to remove those rights.
And here's another good example of that.
And that bill was never actually introduced in the Senate. So we do not have that law that protects those rights currently. And just like Roe v. Wade, as Michael Knowles says, was only 8 years separating Griswold and Roe v. Wade. This bought and paid for extremist, full of Christian nationalists in the Supreme Court could, next July, decide that American citizens do not have a right to contraception. And this is a very influential conservative pundit laying the groundwork for that.
This was less funny than I thought it was going to be when we started this segment.
Again, it is crazy, right? Condoms are kind of gay. But that, like I said, that insanity
It really kind of buries the lead
hiding
to the real
this
story here.
This plan that is currently in the works in the conservative movement.
My goodness.
That was really a productive segment, wasn't it? It's hard to get any word in with this clown.
From one weird freak to another.
Let's talk about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So, Jason, before we get started, I want to have a very, 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 very quick story about a friend of mine who received a text from a friend of theirs. And the text said, "Please, please, please, my friend, help Bobby Kennedy Jr. become our next president. You can make it happen. He sued Monsanto. His perspective on our health as a country and causes of mass shootings may be linked. I believe in you as I believe in him."
Was your friend's friend Kenyan Prince?
No.
Because that's the way this text reads.
It really does, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when that happened, my friend laughed it off and showed it with us. But I wanted to include it here because she assured me this was a real person and a real longtime friend of hers, and she's a longtime Democrat. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., while we can make fun of him for how crazy he's going to be, he's way more dangerous than you think he is. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's start with who exactly is RFK Jr.
And I just want to throw in a little side note here. He's been in the news a lot lately. He's just testified in front of Congress, so you may have heard some audio from him. And like me, you may be curious, what's going on with his voice? He always kind of sounds like he really needs to drink some water. So I was interested and I looked it up just want to share. It is a condition called spasmodic dysphonia.
Which is what?
I guess it's something to do with your vocal cords, where the openings to the vocal cords tense up, and that's what causes that. Like, it kind of sounds like you're getting strangled.
Yeah, like a very strained sound.
So, just in case you're wondering, just a little factoid for you before we dive in.
So let's start with this story. Robert Francis Kennedy Jr. was the son of Robert, or Bobby Kennedy, and the nephew of John F. Kennedy.
Obviously, both his father and his uncle were assassinated. Obviously, John Kennedy while president of the United States, Robert Kennedy while running for president. That's why we're talking about him. Honestly, it's 90% of the reason why he is such a draw in American politics.
Because he's a Kennedy.
The Kennedys are essentially royalty.
Yeah.
Which is disgusting, but it's true.
Right. He went to and, got kicked out of several prestigious prep schools. So, Silver Spoon and all that. In 1982, he was sworn in as the assistant DA for Manhattan, except he resigned a year later after failing the bar exam, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, it's always what you want for one of the top lawyers
right?
for the city.
Then he got arrested for heroin possession and then was sentenced to 2 years probation. So great.
He is a Kennedy.
After that, he worked many years as an environmental investigator and lawyer. You may hear this a lot, actually. We just talked about this in said friend's text message. In 2018, he was the co-counsel of a group in a successful $289 million lawsuit against Monsanto, where a schoolyard janitor who was using their Roundup products was suing them over cancer-causing effects.
Right. After very prolonged exposure.
Correct.
And he was the founder of the Waterkeeper Alliance. And as far as I can tell, very reputable charity, 4 stars on Charity Navigator. And the idea that we should have clean and safe water for drinking and recreation, I can agree with. But that's pretty much where my praise of Robert
That's
Kennedy
where we're going to stop saying nice things about him.
And despite his many protests, including in front of Congress yesterday, about him not being anti-vax, that's ridiculous. He's being slandered everywhere. He's being censored. People are calling him anti-vax. He's never told anyone not to get vaccinated. He's vaccinated. His kids are vaccinated. That's ridiculous. Why would you say that? Well, the first time I ever heard of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was in the context of him being an anti-vaccine activist 10 years ago.
Yep.
And there is a long, long history. We're going to link to the Science-Based Medicine article about him written by David Gorski. Very great
which I
sites.
highly recommend.
We've recommended them in the past. We continue to do so. If you want to know the whole history, and I heard about him. They used to talk about him on the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe podcast. Great podcast. Maybe not quite as good as ours, but, what can you do?
They got all woke and stuff and added women to their podcast. Well, we're just 2 white guys who know what's really up.
And
you can cut all of that.
So,
I also really enjoy the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. Don't hate me. I'm sorry, Dr. Novella.
So he is, despite his many claims, truly an anti-vaxxer, very committed anti-vaxxer. 2 years ago in 2021, he was on another podcast where he literally said that when he sees people with infants in public, he tells them not to get their child vaccinated. And he hopes that if other people tell the same person not to get their child vaccinated, that it will sink in and they will not do it.
Could you imagine how crazy that would be for on the other side? Just this random old guy.
I would spit on someone who told me that. And hope that they might die.
You would have to assume that he has to introduce himself first, because that'd be the only way he wouldn't get immediately spit on in New York. And maybe even after introducing himself, you're a Kennedy? So let's go through some of this totally not being anti-vax history of his. In 2005, Kennedy wrote an article called Deadly Immunity, which argued that vaccines caused autism. Yeah, we're back into this, baby. It was initially published in Rolling Stone and Salon. Kennedy was criticized harshly after the article by numerous medical professionals for blatantly ignoring the multitude of research that went against his position.
And again, let me remind everyone that he is an environmental lawyer and not in any way, shape, or form a scientist or a doctor.
Correct. And also, I just want to have the smallest bit of silver lining, which is that both Rolling Stone and Salon have retracted their article and apologized for it. In 2011, Kennedy founded an anti-vax nonprofit called the World Mercury Project, which is now known as the Children's Health Defense, which we'll talk about.
You can't call it the World Mercury Project anymore because that's gone from the vaccines.
Right.
And you still have to say that it causes autism, right? And vaccines aren't safe. You're going to continue to lie, even though the entire premise of your argument is now completely moot and disproven. So you change your name to Children's Health Defense instead.
So I want to talk about this dang thing. The Children's Health Defense mostly targeted Black and Latino communities with tailored anti-vax messages and fear-mongering nonstop.
And in fact, they are mostly responsible for a deadly 2019 measles outbreak in Samoa. I'll give you this story real quick. In January 2018, 2 infants died at the same hospital on the same day after receiving an MMR, measles, mumps, rubella vaccine.
Oh, no.
The vaccine, the real story is that the vaccine was improperly prepared by 2 nurses who had included a lethal dose of a muscle relaxant and then hid the evidence to cover it up. But that did not stop Kennedy and his Children's Health Defense Organization to quickly spread the lie that the vaccine itself was to blame and was not safe. And as you just indicated with their media blitz campaign in Black and Latino communities, they hammered Samoa with their vaccine disinformation and their fear-mongering, and they kept up that campaign for months, never corrected their information or removed it, even after the nurses were charged, evidence was found in their possession, and they were convicted. This led to a precipitous decline in vaccination rates across the island. Vaccination rates against the measles were 74% in 2017, and it dropped to between 31 and 34% in 2018, even though nearby islands had rates near 99%. In September of 2019, a measles outbreak occurred. By January of 2020, so only a few months later, there were 5,700 reported cases with 83 deaths, mostly children under 5. The island of Samoa has a population just over 200,000. So that means 35%, 1 in 3 people were infected. And the outbreak only ended following a mandatory vaccination law, a vaccine mandate, which had a 94% vaccination rate achieved by the end of December 2019. And they literally had to shut down their entire government except for utility services for 2 days because this outbreak was so bad and so disrupted life on Samoa. Dozens of children and babies died because of Robert Kennedy Jr. and his lies.
And I'm going to make it worse by telling you that they made tons of money off of it too. Because of course, the Children's Health Defense was making a somewhat decent amount of money, but they really blew up during the COVID-19 pandemic. They recorded revenues in 2020 of $6.8 million, and that blew up even more to $15 million in 2021. This is just some random anti-vax nonprofit, and they're making loads of cash. Just from this, I think it was ProPublica reports that show that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was making $250,000 to $300,000 a year in a salary from this group. So he's personally profiting with a huge 6-figure salary on the bodies of children that he's killing because of his lies. The group also runs a news website called The Defender, where they publish anti-vax news and conspiracies and have the wonderful topics such as big pharma, big food, big tech, and big chemical.
Big.
And a quick look at the website. Now, Jason, I went down a rabbit hole and I was losing my mind. We have to go through this video. I'll go fast, I promise. You're greeted with a video from RFK Jr. that does not hesitate one bit to scare parents. It immediately claims, this is on the homepage. I'll make this very clear. This is on the homepage. This is the first thing you see when you look up the Children's Health Defense. And I have to make it very clear that even on typical Google searches, you just look up random things about vaccines, the Children's Health Defense will just come up because they show themselves as a pro-science health organization. And the first first thing they see is this video that immediately claims that vaccines cause autism. And then Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talks about how it's basically the parents' fault if their children has autism. And he uses language such as a parent, I would just be distraught if I did something that would have severely made my child sick and it was preventable. And I would not want to be responsible for that. He goes on to say that today's biggest problem is what they call, quote, Generation Sick, and says today's kids are the unhealthiest any generation has ever been. And tell me about it. He uses a CDC study that says 1 in 6 children in the U.S. have been diagnosed with some kind of developmental disability from 2006 to 2008. Now, just as an FYI, I looked up said article. It still says 1 in 6, and it shows basically the same numbers of what he cited in his own video. So the article is fine. And while he's talking about this, though, the video shows the most severe cases of developmentally challenged children, like children with cerebral palsy and severe forms of autism, like to the point where like you need care 24/7,
like locked in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He also shows like all this art imagery of like parents that are just weeping and crying and holding their children who is like severely disabled,
Using fear and grief.
100%.
Push his nonsense.
He neglects to say that exact same CDC study concludes that the increase is most likely due to increases in parental awareness, access to healthcare, and improved diagnosing techniques and measurements. Basically saying we're better at identifying this than we once were, and we're not ignoring it like we used to be in the past, like saying, hey, if you have ADHD, you're not just some wild kid anymore. We can actually properly diagnose you now.
And treat you.
And
that is, of course, the reason why autism cases have increased so much over the last 20, 30 years, is because we now understand that autism has a wider spectrum, and it is not just those extreme cases where kids basically do not respond to external stimuli, and more kids are diagnosed with autism because of that. And it's not any sort of external factor that we have to try to determine.
Well, and you kind of talked about this as well. The way they showed kids in this video, they're showing kids in wheelchairs and parents, like I said, holding them and just weeping their eyes out. It's insane. So the fact that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is blatantly misrepresenting the science and misrepresenting the facts to scare innocent parents into not vaccinating their kids is disgusting.
And everything that they've ever come up with as far as what the mechanism, what the cause might be, has been proven to be false, and they just make up something new or keep pushing their false claims as if that evidence didn't already exist.
And just because I just want to make my time on this stupid website worthwhile, I also found out they have what's called CHD, or Children's Health Defense TV, where they produce multiple web-based anti-vax shows on their own website because they can't do it on other platforms anymore because they'll get kicked off immediately, with shows like The Autism Detective, Deep State Tactics 101, and The People's Testament, with the latest episode being The Hidden Truths of the HPV vaccine.
Oh, now they're on HPV.
Oh, they've been hugely against the HPV vaccine for a while.
Fun. Let's all get cervical cancer.
Now, where you probably have known, or you may have heard at least, of RFK Jr., if you didn't hear before the 2020 pandemic, was that he was one of the infamous disinformation dozen. And I'll include the study in our show notes as well. But basically, this study found that 65% of the over 800,000 anti-vaccine posts that were analyzed by this group were attributable to 12 influential anti-vax accounts. Kennedy is one of the 3 most influential people of this dozen, which counted for half of all anti-vax content on Facebook.
So that means that he is responsible for what's got to be at least 100,000 anti-vax posts.
Yes.
On Facebook. From one idiot.
Yes. And just imagine the COVID-related deaths because of it. So this guy has blood on his hands. Real blood on his hands. And the dude's running for president. And people are talking about it.
Yeah, usually you don't become a war criminal until after you're president.
Kennedy pushed countless conspiracies and misinformation on Facebook, from the flu shot is 2.4 times more deadly than COVID-19. I've heard that one before. To the Bill Gates wants to secretly microchip us conspiracy. And then he also, of course, threw in a couple of 5G conspiracies as well, and claimed that Wi-Fi radiation opens up your blood-brain barrier.
That
was on Joe Rogan, wasn't it?
That's what he said. Lets the toxins into your brain.
So, and
Wi-Fi. How many years have we all been just constantly surrounded by Wi-Fi?
Blah.
We would all be dead.
Yeah. Now, again, we also have just 2 minutes, Jason. We have to talk about Joe Rogan's role in all this as well.
Well, Joe Rogan is the same. He pushes all this conspiracy stuff too. He loves it.
He does. And he's also the one that basically boosted RFK Jr.'s campaign.
Well, he's been going on all of the he can't go on mainstream media because they're going to push back against him. He's got to go on all these weirdos, these online crazies, these scumbags that they're only in it for the money at the end of the day. And they love pushing conspiracies. That's why they're all now in bed with the conservative party. The conservative movement has become a conspiracy theory movement. I can remember when medical misinformation was mostly a Democrat problem.
Yeah, it was a severely left-wing problem. I even remember the Simpsons gag where it's like Marge was in like a different neighborhood and she was like, oh good, it's so liberal. And then someone like had like a I got vaccinated wristband and goes, oh good, but not too liberal. Yeah. Those days are gone, man.
Right. It's completely gone the other way. Kennedy has also said multiple times that toxins in water are turning children gay and transgender.
They're turned. Oh, you have that.
Right. It's the it's the exact same claim and from the same exact studies.
Oh
even
no.
That Alex Jones famously said, I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. And I'm going to include, of course, the link to the YouTube song remix of the Gay Frogs.
Thank
Alex
you for
Jones.
also putting this link in all caps. I think that
It's appropriate.
that's appropriate.
Alex Jones talks in all caps. He does.
It's also worth noting that while Kennedy was pushing COVID conspiracies
and making, as we noted, millions of dollars.
Yep. He also received nearly $150,000 in PPP loans. So great.
Yeah, we really need to stop those kids from getting their student $10,000 in their student loan payments repaid. And we don't have it in this week's news. I know it happened that they did push through some student loan forgiveness if you had already made payments for like 20 to 25 years, which
that doesn't help me at all.
Which does not help Joe. It's fine. I'm glad they're still trying other avenues, but yeah. Keep going, Joe.
I am. Thank you. Now, this one I actually had no clue about, and this one made me very angry. In 2021, Kennedy debuted a propaganda film through the Children's Health Defense called Medical Racism, the New Apartheid.
Let's push some more fear of vaccination and modern medicine to the black community who justly already does not trust it. But let's keep pushing that, and hopefully we can kill some black kids.
Also, I just want to make it quick because I also had to double check just to be safe. The Children's Health Defense team literally could not be whiter than what it is. These are the whitest looking people I have ever seen in my entire life. So let's talk a little bit about this movie. It did target black Americans in an attempt to create vaccine hesitancy. That's no shocker. It claimed that people with African blood react differently to vaccines.
We all have African blood, technically.
And blacks are disproportionately harmed by vaccine because they, quote, react to them differently.
Which is also not true at all.
Promotional material contained emotional imagery with messages like, find out how blacks and others of color have been used as medical guinea pigs without informed consent for the greater good, and how you can stop the abuse. And literally now liking vaccination to people of guinea pigs and literal abuse.
Right. It's using facts like that these things did happen to sow fear and mistrust in a misplaced area to promote your own agenda. And that's disgusting.
Now we're caught up. Oh, God. Because now we get to talk about the crazy things that he said like last week, where RFK Jr. claimed that COVID targets only white and black people, well, not the Jews or Chinese.
And this came from the infamous fart dinner.
Yes.
In which super pro-environmentalist Robert Kennedy was hosting a fundraising Thanksgiving dinner that, for some reason, had a lot of anti-climate change conservatives. And that caused an argument among guests in which, hilariously, one guest decided to fart as some sort of aggressive measure in his argument. If you want to, we're not going to link it, but you can find it. It's funny. At that same dinner, which no one was supposed to be recording, by the way, and there's a lot of footage from, he also said that COVID-19, and I'll be generous because he was just asking questions. He said an argument could be made that it was a genetic bioweapon developed specifically to target white and black people and somehow not the Chinese and Ashkenazi Jews.
Well, and he didn't know if it was deliberately or not.
Right, but you would always speculate that that was the case if you had no opinion on it. I'm just saying, it could have potentially been a bioweapon developed by the Jews and the Chinese to kill off whites and blacks. I'm just putting it out there. Maybe a little bit of a thought experiment. No particular reason why.
And again, this was like last week he did this.
And one of the authors of the study that he was quoting as evidence for this, surprisingly, said that Robert Kennedy, again, an environmental lawyer, not a doctor or a scientist, that he is wrong about its findings. Quote, "This type of misinterpretation will hurt academic research to help us end the pandemic," the author said in an emailed statement to CBS News. I also have a quote from his own sister, Carrie, who said, "I strongly condemn my brother's deplorable and untruthful remarks last week about COVID being engineered for ethnic targeting," which she wrote on Monday. I also just today saw a video from his cousin, John F. Kennedy's grandson, who said that Robert Kennedy is an embarrassment to the Kennedy family and is just trading off of the legacy of their family, which is true on both accounts.
I was just going to say. And of course, RFK Jr.'s comments made neo-Nazis and anti-Semites super happy, and they went crazy over their support for him on like various things like Telegram and any other places. They are no longer banned from like 8chan or whatever it was, calling him based, and said he was 100% correct and that he's going to vote for him just to make the Jews angry. So good job, RFK. You're really doing it.
So why are we concerned? Are we concerned that Robert Kennedy poses a real threat to Joe Biden in the Democratic primary?
And actually, here's a good thing with that as well. There have been a lot of articles saying that, RFK Jr. in some states is pushing as nearly as 20% in the polls. Number one, it's because it's a Kennedy and they just happen to know what a Kennedy is. And number two, no, that's not the case. He's actually polling around more so like the early teens. And number three, it's because Biden may not be even on the ballot in some of those states anyway. The likelihood of RFK Jr. becoming the Democratic nominee is zero.
Yes, I agree. Zero chance. There is a funny circumstance where he could potentially win the first primary in New Hampshire because...
Well, like I just said,
because Joe Biden might not be on the ballot.
Correct.
Specifically because New Hampshire is basically going against the wishes of the Democratic Party by holding their primary first.
Before South Carolina.
And as a protest to that, the Democratic Party is not going to put Joe Biden on the ballot. And if Robert Kennedy runs, he would have,
he's gonna win.
Was Marianne Williamson he'd be running against.
Which would actually be even funnier if that she just comes out of nowhere and just wins.
So you might have those early headlines, but yes, in the overall picture, Joe Biden's an incumbent president. There's no chance. If Joe Biden were to die, Kamala Harris would still easily beat Robert Kennedy in the Democratic primary. He has no chance. That's not what we're concerned about.
What we are concerned about is that Republicans are using RFK Jr. as a literal tool to defeat Biden in the general election. Because while RFK Jr. doesn't have any chance of winning himself, he gives Republicans an outlet to bash Biden even further and to make more Democrats not want to go vote.
And it's possible that after he loses the Democratic primary, he might run as a third-party candidate. And again, with that name recognition of being a Kennedy, for some stupid reason, he could pull enough support. You remember how in 2020, the election was still very close.
Yep.
Just 5% would be enough to swing the election from Joe Biden to Donald Trump. There is also the possibility that Robert Kennedy might be a somehow running mate of Donald Trump. I think that is way less likely.
Yeah, that'd be kind of crazy.
Because all you have to do is think, Donald Trump is older as well. He will be in his 80s if he were to win the presidency. Yes, Joe Biden is older. I get it. But let's just say Donald Trump wins with Robert Kennedy as his running mate. If Donald Trump dies, what are Republicans and conservatives going to get out of a Robert Kennedy presidency? They might get some tax breaks for the rich because Robert Kennedy is basically a libertarian these days.
Yep.
But,
well, yeah, because we didn't talk about this before, but when he was on Jordan Peterson's show, for God's sakes, he talked about his climate change stances and all that fun stuff. He talked a bunch of crazy crap with that even out today, and said that he was going to let the free market decide what's going on with climate regulations.
Yeah, even if you go to his website, when you go under environmentalism, his first proposal is to basically remove farm subsidies.
So good environmental activism there.
Right. And he's also a big crypto guy. So,
because of course he is.
Big Bitcoin fan.
Yeah.
But beyond just those things, if you think of the things that the Republican Party really cares about, like what we just talked about, all of the evangelical Christian anti-civil rights stuff, they're not going to get that out of Robert Kennedy. If you, again, look at his website and you look at his positions, he is terrified to take a clear stance on any of those issues. Here's a quote from it. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has clear positions on most of today's divisive trigger issues, like abortion, guns, and immigration. Doesn't say what any of them are. But he knows that both sides have legitimate concerns and legitimate moral positions. No one is deplorable.
What a statement.
That is not going to work for conservatives having him as the president.
Yeah, look at what happened with Scott Walker in 2016. That's what he tried to do.
So that, to me, disqualified. They want him to be the chaos third-party candidate that just pulls enough support.
Well, and we know that Republicans have done this in the past. They tried doing this with Kanye West.
Which was a very terrible idea, but...
So, and we know that they're trying to do something similar with this again. We also know that a super PAC that is raising money for RFK Jr. was literally started by a guy who helped elect Marjorie Taylor Greene. And we know that House Republicans are propping up RFK Jr. non-stop in an attempt to bash Biden in any way possible.
That's why they just pulled him into hearings on social media censorship yesterday.
Literally. They're going to prop him up as much as literally possible, because even though he's considered a Democrat, they know that he may eye a third party run like Jason said. And guess what happens if he does? He's going to be fully funded by Republican parties all throughout the country just to make sure he gets on the ballot and take away votes from Joe Biden.
He has said that the two people pushing him the hardest to run for president for months before he announced his campaign were Steve Bannon and Roger Stone, two people who worked at the very top of Donald Trump's campaign in 2016 and 2020.
So to my friend's friend, and if anyone that you know tries to push off RFK Jr. onto you or anyone else you know, send them this episode and call them out immediately for saying the literal craziest thing that you probably have ever heard in your entire life. Friends don't let friends support RFK Jr. And do not underestimate the damage this one man has done and will continue to do for a very long time. Thank you for listening. We hope to see you in the next episode. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at ThinkProPod. You can email us at thinkpropod@gmail.com. And remember, when in doubt, think progressively. So Trump announced on Sunday that he received. So Trump announced that he received a letter. Oh my God. So Trump announced. Okay, what the fuck is happening? So Trump announced that he. Why can't I say this? All right, I guess we'll talk about. There's a spider.